At this time, we are kicking off the webinar and we're going live. I will ask all attendees to please turn on your cameras, and I would like to officially welcome everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How Bulgarian-Based Businesses Can Expand into the US Market in Times of COVID-19, organized by the US-Bulgarian Chamber in America and supported by the European Center for Transport Policies, Ministry of Economy, Republic of Bulgaria, Aston Law Group, and media partners, Investor.bg and Bloomberg TV Bulgaria. And I'd like to also sincerely thank to all partner organizations who share and popularize the event, including American Chamber of Commerce in Bulgaria and many others. Recorded version of this webinar will be available later. We also are streaming live currently through our Chamber's Facebook page. Please, if you were not able to register, you can still view us live and submit questions through the comments field. Please like us and follow us. There is a Q&A chat box where all the attendees can submit their questions. We will get to your questions at the end after we have heard from all of our panelists and presenters. And with that being said, I would like to officially begin today's webinar with brief welcoming remarks. And I will turn over to our first guest, and this is Mrs. Yana Topalova, the Deputy Minister of Economy of Republic of Bulgaria. She knows firsthand how important are small and medium-sized companies for the local economy, as her professional experience includes managing the Bulgarian Small and Medium-Sized Enterprise Promotion Agency, and how support services are instrumental in providing practical advice and guidance for successful entrepreneurship. Mrs. Yana Topalova, I'm turning the floor to you. Can you hear us? Mrs. Topalova, can you hear us?
I'm afraid her screen is frozen.
Okay, here we go. Mrs. Topalova, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear now.
Perfectly. Thank you, Elise. Thank you for this opportunity. It is really my pleasure to address the participants in the online webinar on the opportunities for the Bulgarian companies to successfully expand their activities into the US market during the current economically difficult times of the COVID-19 pandemic. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this timely initiative, the US-Bulgarian Chamber in America, and its team who have been instrumental in putting this event together. I hope that today's forum will provide an excellent platform for the participants to get acquainted with the latest economic developments in the US, to expand their knowledge on the specific legal base for operating on this market, as well as to share and discuss ideas and relevant solutions to the challenges caused by the COVID-19 global health crisis. Let me also assure you that the expansion of trade and investment relations with the US remains a priority for the Bulgarian government, and the Ministry of Economy shall continue to support all the initiatives leading to a sustained strengthening of our business ties. In the context of the current uncertainties experienced globally, the US has remained a very important economic partner of Bulgaria. We are engaged in an active dialogue and cooperation in the field of trade and investment. Over the past several years, our bilateral trade expanded significantly, exhibiting especially strong growth during 2017-2018. The US has been steadily ranking among our top 20 trading partners with the country recently rising to the 15th place of Bulgaria's export markets. In 2018, the US-Bulgarian merchandise trade registered a robust 36% growth to over 975 million US dollars, surpassing thus the previous record level from 2006. The upturn in trade turnover has sustained in 2019 to a new peak of $985 billion, followed by a further 5% year-on-year increase during the first half of 2020, according, of course, to the preliminary figures. Most notably, Bulgaria's exports to the US reached 633 million US dollars in 2018, outstripping by far its former record high of 2012. In 2019, our export sales practically sustained their level from the previous year, reaffirming that the US as Bulgaria's third largest export market outside of the EU. Despite these positive trends in the trade relations with the US, we do consider that the achieved levels of cooperation are well below the economic and resource potential of both countries. We believe that there is a scope for improving further our export performance in the US market, particularly with respect to the sales of electronics, high-tech machinery, auto and IT components, chemicals, medical instruments, food and bioproducts. Special attention is also being paid to the adequate support of small and medium-sized enterprises in coping with the challenges associated with the access to the US market, and I'm sure that today's event will contribute to this effect. Bulgaria also puts an emphasis on promoting innovations and technology-driven growth that will undoubtedly help local exporters seeking untapped niche markets in the US. Our economic policy gives priority on the development of high-tech services, environmentally friendly and energy-saving products, food and agriculture-related technologies and innovations. With the COVID-19 outbreak this year, we are facing a relatively unknown situation with various challenges and negative consequences. The new environment needs flexible political, economic, and social measures. The Bulgarian government has a clear understanding of the fact that predictable and stable rules for doing business are a major factor that companies take into account when undertaking an investment decision. As a part of our efforts to make the country a better place to do business, we put high priority on constantly improving the business environment, including continuously reducing the administrative burden on business and citizens. The pursued economic policy also gives special emphasis to the development of economic sectors in which Bulgaria traditionally has advantages, as well as sectors which create higher added value and contribute to an improved competitiveness of the economy. These sectors include machine building, automotive industry, electronics, information and communication technologies, chemical and pharmaceutical industry, agriculture and tourism. In conclusion, I would like to say that in these challenging times, trade and investment cooperation seems to be a most important source of economic growth, allowing each country to benefit from its particular skills and competitive advantages. The Ministry of Economy of Bulgaria remains strongly committed to support the business contacts and joint projects between our two countries that build up the foundations of a successful economic partnership. I'm confident that we can work together for enhancing further the US-Bulgarian bilateral economic relations. Thank you and good luck to today's webinar.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Topalova, for those welcoming remarks. Thank you. It is great to hear all these great numbers and the results. We do hope to continue collaborate and enhance even more further our economic relationships. So thank you for being with us here today. And it is my pleasure to introduce our next guest. This is Mr. Liam Sullivan. He has joined us. He's the Senior Economic Officer and Deputy Political Economic Section Chief at the U.S. Embassy in Sofia. Liam, can you hear us?
I sure can. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Greetings from beautiful Sofia. We really appreciate the participation in today's panel. The whole embassy family wants to send their greetings, including Ambassador Mustafa, in this wonderful holiday time. So I appreciate the words of the Deputy Minister, so I won't repeat a lot of the facts and figures. As you know, what we deal with here at the embassy, our main area of focus is the Bulgarian investment climate, and we talk to the ministry along with partners such as AmCham and others about how we can improve that. And there's always room for improvement in any relationship. But what we want is a very strong bilateral relationship. We want to see a prosperous Bulgaria as a friend and ally of ours. That's in our interest, and that's in the interests of long term for the Bulgarian citizens. So today what we're talking about is a little different. It's the reverse of that paradigm. It's talking about investment and export to the United States. And in some ways that's a little bit of a simpler equation, but also it can also in many ways be complicated. And why is that? Well, we should know that America is the world's most attractive consumer market. So that's the good thing. And that's why everyone's tuned in today, right? They want a piece of that pie. They know that there are opportunities in the United States. And why is that? Some of it is just the basic matter of size. It's 330 million consumers, so about 50 times the size of Bulgaria. And what does the United States have to offer? We have to offer a very dedicated workforce that's known for high labor productivity. We're also talking about, as we see here in Bulgaria, growth in innovation. Everybody knows Silicon Valley, that's the headliner, but there are other hubs all scattered throughout the United States, whether we talk about Boston, Massachusetts, or Austin, Texas, or the Research Triangle in Carolina, or as many of you sitting in Washington know that there's a thriving tech industry there. So that's exciting, and people want to get that know-how, they want to establish those networks, and they want to help build their businesses. But the real fundamental strength that the United States offers is our diversity. You have any number of people from all throughout the world, different ethnicities, different nationalities. They all, again, ascribe to that American dream, and they want to be a part of that. And that means you have pockets of consumers. If you have a great idea, you're going to be able to find a market for it. But that can be intimidating because America, a large market with a lot of diversity, there's a lot of different layers that you have to go through as you're setting up your business. And later on, I think you'll hear a lot of those technical details. But we're talking about 50 states. We're talking about the District of Columbia. We're talking about 5 territories. And then we got to talk about the local level, where we talk about cities, et cetera. So tax implications, hiring implications, regulations, rules, that can all change as you cross state lines and as you look at different markets. So what do you do? And that's where my colleagues at the Department of Commerce come in. They have a fantastic program called Select USA. I'm sure we'll talk about it later, and some of your presenters will have a lot of expertise in this. But in my experience working abroad, it's just fantastic. Companies that are interested in the United States can get those answers, and they can be connected with people that can give them the guidance, whether it's at the state level, it's at the local level, or at the national level. So the headline event of that is the Select USA Summit, generally something that takes place every 2 years. Sadly, last year we had to cancel because of the COVID crisis. But it was just announced yesterday that they set the dates for the 2021 summit. So it's very exciting news there. It'll be in early June. It'll be 5 days. Unfortunately, due to COVID, most of it will be online. But it's a fantastic opportunity. If you have your ideas, you bring them, and Commerce is going to do the matchmaking and make sure you get the answers that you have there. So you shouldn't be overwhelmed. Today, I think you'll get a lot of technical and administrative and bureaucratic information. Don't let that overwhelm you, but just know that you want to tap into that market and you want to help that American dream, follow your American dream, and build a stronger Bulgaria and build a stronger United States. So with that, I'll cede it back to you. But again, thank you very much. Happy holidays to everybody. And the embassy really appreciates being part of today's wonderful panel. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Liam. It's a great honor to have you join our webinar. I do look forward to maybe doing more and talking about Select USA and some FDI investment opportunities as well. So thank you. And now I'd like to turn over the floor to Mr. Daniel Kirakov, who is the Communication and Public Affairs Manager at the American Chamber of Commerce in Bulgaria. Daniel has more than 14 years in corporate communications and CSR. He comes with a very strong background from the energy sector and is actively leading a Center for Analysis and Crisis Communication. I'm sure in this ever-changing pandemic situation, we all know how crisis communication is a key element for each organization. So without further ado, Daniel.
Elise, good morning. Good morning, America. I always wanted to say that. Glad to have me, and thank you very much for inviting AmCham Bulgaria to be part of this fantastic session that you have organized. Previous speakers, the Deputy Minister and Liam from the US Embassy, mentioned quite a lot of important facts that we try to follow and digest and to be part of our not only public messages, but to be part of our overall support to members and to friendship organizations like the US-Bulgarian Chamber of Commerce in America. Elise, once again, thank you very much for inviting us. We are looking forward to have a fruitful cooperation, and what we can do jointly is to continue and to invest efforts in sharing knowledge, building relationships, and improving business to business or person to person relations in order to be active part in the transatlantic economy. As you know, the transatlantic economy includes the United States and the European Union, or Europe as a whole. And it is the biggest market. And to the number that Liam mentioned, 350 people in the US, we can add up to 500 million people in Europe. You can imagine how big market is that. Another number that is being quoted quite often by our sister AmCham in Brussels is that this is AmCham EU. This is that the 75% of the global data is being traveling across the Atlantic Ocean. And as being part of the digital economy, we have to focus on diversity of products and businesses that can improve the lives of people, but again, the countries. And we as nation should focus on our own resources, and the most strategic one is knowledge and people. So we have to learn a lot from the United States, but again, we have to be strategic and peer partners in both NATO and one-to-one relationships. As you know, United States and Bulgaria started a strategic dialogue that is focused on improving the investment climate in Bulgaria. What Liam touched upon on that, we working together in order to facilitate strategic projects and improvements like 5G, like gas diversification, like many other things that will make our market and our businesses much more competitive. But again, what will be of importance of that relationship? We see the relationship between the US-Bulgarian Chamber of Commerce in America and AmCham Bulgaria as sister organizations. We have to continue expand our relationship, and such a webinar like this one is an excellent opportunity, at least to know our faces, and then you'll get to know each other by emails and probably cell phones. And afterwards, probably we'll start building projects and working together. So looking forward to expand and continue our relationship. All the best to all the speakers, and to all attendees, happy holidays. I'll stay on in this line. Looking forward to learn something new, and of course to communicate it to our members when the webinar is over. Elise, back to you.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Thank you for the wonderful words. I do look forward to continue our collaboration as well. I'm sure it's going to be a great, and we'll have many more initiatives to work on jointly. And I hope to see you someday in person after these times are behind us. So thank you so much for joining us. And I'd like to introduce our next guest, that is Mr. Ivo Konstantinov. Mr. Ivo Konstantinov is currently the Economic Counselor and Trade Attaché, holding the rank of Chancellor in his capacity as head of the economic section of the Bulgarian Embassy in Washington, D.C. His main areas of operation are centered on imports, exports, and trade facilitation, investment promotion, IT cooperation enhancement, agricultural development, R&D outsourcing and exchange, and new business development between the United States and the Republic of Bulgaria. So it is my pleasure to turn over the floor to Ivo Konstantinov.
Thank you, Elise. Good morning, everyone. I really appreciate the US-Bulgarian Chamber's initiative to set this event up, and I hope it's the first of many, and it becomes those become regular for us. I want to very shortly, very briefly share a wonderful story of the Bulgarian-American economic relations that is very underreported and quite amazing. I want to share with you some facts that you may never have heard before, because they are not found in the official statistics. They have to be sourced from different and various information platforms like the World Trade Organization, the United Nations, and from the ground where me and my colleague in California, Ljubka Kachakova, are constantly involved directly with the companies on the field. So we too here in the US, Ljubka and I, are living and breathing what I'm about to say, and it's quite amazing. Technically, between the two countries, and I want to share the broad picture so that I put this event in context, and I think you'll be surprised. Between Bulgaria and the United States, there's between $3 and $3.5 billion of flow of cash flow going each year. $1.5 billion is commodity trade, imports, exports. The Bulgarian exports to the United States is quite underreported because of transshipment. So, for example, Bulgaria's exports to the US for IKEA is reported as Swedish exports, but it's technically Bulgarian exports. And for many other reasons like that, the Bulgarian exports for a third consequent year is expected to overpass $1 billion. And $1.5 billion is the overall trade, as we call Stokovmen in Bulgarian. This is quite impressive because, believe it or not, if you think about it, that makes the United States the second largest Bulgarian export partner after Turkey. And by export partner, I don't include the European Union. For us, the European Union is home. EU is domestic. So sometimes the US goes third after China, but most years our exports to the United States overtakes even the Bulgarian exports to China, vastly dwarfing Bulgarian exports to other traditional past destinations, even neighboring countries like Serbia. We export more to the United States than to Serbia, for example, which is a neighboring country. And about 3.5 times larger exports to the United States from Bulgaria than from Bulgaria to Russia, for example, just saying. The US is the fifth largest investor in Bulgaria, and thanks to AmCham and the Bulgarian Institute for Market Economy, we found that out 2 years ago, that there was a lot of underreporting of US investment in Bulgaria. That's a cumulative $10.5 billion since 1990. And that ranks the US fifth largest investor in Bulgaria, number 5. And you'll be surprised what companies that are a home staple in Bulgaria are actually American owned, like Hanas Paruch, the tile manufacturer in Isperich, or Serdica, Danone in Sofia is actually Schreiber Foods, Minnesota owned, and many others. And it's an American company that is the second largest private employer in Bulgaria. That's Sensata from Attleboro, Massachusetts. And all of this is not often reported in our media, so I wanted to share this with you. But the story of the Bulgarian investments and business in the United States is nonetheless impressive. And what I'm about to share is something probably you're not going to find anywhere, because we have it from the field, from the invoices, from the e-commerce sales, from our daily communications with the Bulgarian community in the United States. Bulgarian companies manufacturing and services in the United States generate about $1.5 billion of annual revenue, and we Bulgarians employ 5,000 American citizens from our direct investments into the United States. The story of the Bulgarian businesses in America is really impressive. We have automation and robotics manufacturing plants, veterinary pharmaceuticals, high resolution digital cameras, and that's to name just among a few. We assemble light firearms in Nevada, we manufacture meat products in Chicago, and we run a fleet of over 5,000 trucks that move the economy of this country. 5,000 trucks are Bulgarian owned in the United States. So that's in the transportation sector. So the relationships between the two countries are much to be accounted for, and there is a lot to be told yet. We also have impressive numbers of US visitors, although America is not considered to be the top tourism generating country for Bulgaria. We are still visited by 100,000 Americans each year, actually surpassing that the past 2 years. Most American tourists come to Bulgaria through the river cruises, Viking River Cruises being the largest operator. But my calculations is that since 1990, 1.5 million American citizens, Americans, have visited Bulgaria in unique visits to our country. So we are not completely unknown here. I will leave my colleague in California to share more about our accomplishments and opportunities in the tech sector. I only want to highlight what one of my bosses and Deputy Minister of Economy, Yana Topalova, just mentioned in the opening part, that there are many untapped niches in underserved markets that Bulgarian companies can approach in market entry in the United States. But also that because it's the biggest consumer market in the world and everybody wants a piece of it, market entry on the US market also takes some investment. So Bulgarian companies should take that into consideration. Mine and Lupka's role is your first door, suggestions, marketing strategies. There are limited resources because there's just 2 of us for the entire US, so we can hardly do sales, direct sales for you and project management, but we can help you set up here and give you the first information on the market. So the story of Bulgarian-American relations is a material for a book. From Hawaii to Key West, Florida, from San Diego, California to Burlington, Vermont. We are everywhere, from Dobrich to Petrich with American investment. So just I'm going to end with one fun trivia. 7-Eleven Kazichene made croissants are in every Exxon Mobil gas station in America and in every 7-Eleven. So that's made in Kazichene. And I'm going to pass the floor to my colleague, and thank you, Elise, for this opportunity to share.
Thank you, Ivo. Thank you for giving us synopsis and sharing facts that we couldn't find on official reports. That is really important, the information that doesn't really get out to be published for folks to know. I want to turn over to Mrs. Lupka Kachakova, who is the Commercial and Economic Counselor of the Republic of Bulgaria in Los Angeles. Like Ivo said, she is her colleague. As politician and diplomat, Mrs. Kachakova has a broad experience in international affairs in the field of trade and investments, water management, and transboundary issues. Her mission is to strengthen bilateral economic relations by promoting Bulgaria as an investment destination and supporting Bulgarian companies that export goods and services to the United States. So, Lupka, I'm turning over to you.
Okay. So, hello everyone. Thank you very much, Elise, for this wonderful organization of the webinar. I will continue with the message of my colleague Ivo, and the overall message of his presentation is to encourage Bulgarian companies from all sectors to strive to penetrate the US market because it works. It's the largest consumer market. There is a place for everyone, and we are here to help. We can give you a lot of success stories of Bulgarian companies who are operating very successfully in the United States. In California, we are even selling guitars produced in Kazanlak from Cremona company. So there is a place for Bulgarian companies. They must invest, of course, in marketing. The penetration is not easy. All the managers must be very patient because things don't happen so quickly as all of us want to happen. But we are here to help. And from the high-tech sector, I can tell you that we have two very successful Bulgarian IT companies in the United States, Bullpros and Scale Focus. They have their offices here, and we work with them and we help them. They have projects in the United States. Another very successful company is IPS. They are producing energy conversion technology, and their first project is in Hawaii. And they will make off-grid electrification of one private ISO in Hawaii. So we are very proud with the success of IPS in the United States. One of the, a lot of questions we received with Ivo for how startups can succeed and present themselves in the United States. And I will use this opportunity to share two major events in 2021. I strongly recommend Bulgarian startups to register for Angel Launch, a virtual pitch event, which will take place on January 15. And of course, all startups in Bulgaria are welcome to register and to become members of the largest community of startups, founders, and innovators, a startup grind in Silicon Valley. They educate, support, and connect startups with investors. Their global conference will be, unfortunately, virtual this year in February 23rd to 25th of February. The website is startupgrind.com. So my message to the startups in Bulgaria is to become members of Startup Grind community, because they will get a lot of services, workshops, discussions, presentations to investors, and access to 1.2 million audience here in the United States. For companies in the food industry, one of the largest exhibitions in the United States, Fancy Food, is canceled, but in January, Specialty Food will be a live digital market event. So companies from the food industry are encouraged to check and to register for Specialty Food event, which will take place in January from 19 to 21st. The cost of virtual events is much lower than of the physical, the real exhibitions. So I and Ivo, we strongly recommend Bulgarian companies to participate in these virtual events, because Specialty Food will meet buyers, importers, distributors, and brokers with the companies, and all Bulgarian companies will have the opportunity to chat and to talk one-to-one with buyers and importers. Because, as Ivo said, we're only two of us in the United States. We want to help all companies, but unfortunately, we don't have this resource. So participation in exhibitions, in virtual events, in webinars, and becoming a member of Specialty Food for example, for food industry, or Startup Grind for startups, are highly encouraged by us. And I do believe that it's fruitful, and they will see the results of this membership. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Kachakova, for this informative announcement. Thank you so much for joining us. I think, like Ivo said, and Mrs. Kachako also said, there are limited sources that the government can also offer. So please use the sources and connections in the network that the US-Bulgarian Chamber in America now has in the face of us. A lot of virtual events will happen next year. We will keep in touch with all of you, of course, and keep you appraised of what's coming next as far as projects and events. But I'd like to make sure that our folks know that now with a newly established organization such as the US-Bulgarian Chamber in America, there's also a third body that can answer to some of those questions and also help the startup businesses and any businesses that will want to go bilaterally. And with that, I will introduce briefly myself and talk only a few minutes for the chamber. And then I'd like to turn it over to our presenters because we are a little bit behind schedule. I am Elise Nesterov. I run the US-Bulgarian Chamber in America, fairly very newly established nonprofit 501c3 organization. We kicked off the chamber this year in January, although it seems like it was a long time ago, but it was only in the beginning of this year with an event at the embassy. And we've been in existence for exactly 321 days today. And I want to only give you a report of what we were able to accomplish in 321 days under abnormal circumstances since the pandemic happened when we opened. So we have established a board of directors of very large and known companies. One of our board members is from Scale Focus. Mrs. Luka Kachako already mentioned that company. We established an advisory board. We worked, the synergy in that board is great. We had our first successful board campaign that went well as well. We hosted 3 European affairs interns and we are continuing to offer internships. We welcomed new chambers that we are fully supporting and connecting them with the US businesses. Partnered with 2020 Census, Grant Professional Association on International Grant Professionals Day, the Ripple Online Networking Event, and the USACE Investment Summit. Organized and presented sessions on COVID-19 and economy, COVID-19 and immigration, COVID-19 and international fair state, 7 easy steps to selling your Bulgarian products in the US, and the session on why intellectual property. We supported the International Space Corporation for a safe and sustainable world information session that was conducted by the Ministry of Economy and other partners in Sofia. We also currently support the Sister Cities initiative between Pittsburgh and Sofia. We hope to see a renewal of the pact very soon, and participated in the initiative of the Bulgarian National Radio through COVID-19 tough times, and participate in the National Travel and Tourism Week and the United Nations Leaders Summit. These are only a few things to name that the newly established US-Bulgarian Chamber in America was able to do in 321 days under pandemic circumstances. We look forward to what the future holds and hope to continue partner with all of you in great initiatives to align with more similar-minded organizations. So thank you so much for all of you guests for being and greeting our webinar and for kicking it off. And with that, I would really like to turn over to our presenters. And I am delighted to introduce our first topic, which is marketing strategies for selling to the US, presented by the Executive Director of the World Trade Center in Harrisburg, Mrs. Tina Weyant. The World Trade Center Harrisburg, it's a nonprofit organization that promotes international trade and supports companies in South Central Pennsylvania to compete and prosper in a global economy. As a licensed member of the World Trade Centers Association, the Central Pennsylvania's World Trade Center is one of over 330 World Trade Centers located in 100 countries, connecting companies with global opportunities. Tina?
Thank you, Elise. I don't know if you can get the slides on. Yes. So just really quickly, as Elise already mentioned, we are a nonprofit trade association and we have over 25 years in existence. We do try to connect global companies with local companies with global opportunities. And I just wanted to say hello to Ivo, because a couple of years ago, your embassy actually participated in one of our trade conferences. and it was really nice to meet you in person. So I really appreciate that. I do have some statistics on Bulgaria-US trade relationships, but a lot of that was already mentioned. I don't really want to go into too much detail, except to say that the US imports from Bulgaria have definitely been increasing over the years. The picture on the slide right now just shows merchandise trade, which does not include services, obviously, but you can see the increase. You can also see that we import a lot more from Bulgaria than we export to Bulgaria. Bulgaria ranks number 84 out of 230 countries for US imports, and for exports, it's ranked at 103 based on the 2019 US Census data. Some of the top US goods that are exported to Bulgaria include ore and ash, electric machinery, sound equipment, TV equipment, nuclear reactors, vehicles, fuels, aircraft, spacecraft, a lot of high-tech components in that list. And if you go to the next list that shows what we import from Bulgaria, you will actually see that there is quite a lot of similarities. If you could go to the next slide. I don't think I can. Can I advance them? Yes, so between what we export to Bulgaria and what we import, there's a lot of similarity. You see the nuclear reactors, you see the optical goods from Bulgaria, you see iron and steel, you see a really broad range, and these are only the top 20 categories, I believe. If anybody is interested, any company is interested for this specific harmonized tariff code number, the US Census Bureau tracks all imports and exports based on the HS code, and we can pull those statistics for you. Anybody can. It's public record. Yeah, we can go to the next. And it's so what I wanted to mention is if you see a product that you make that the US already imports, and your basic Bulgarian competitors can compete in the US, there's a pretty good chance that you can do the same thing. Yeah, can you advance the slides, or do? I'm kind of. Ivaio, can you advance the slides for me, or do I have to do that?
Give us just a second. If I would just, yes.
That's the last one. Yeah. Okay, so here we go. So just to show you some of the major products that the US imports. I mean, it's a huge market for industrial goods as well as for consumer goods. And we have services, and then we have the merchandise imports. For services, our top import for the United States in general for all countries is the travel industry, followed by business services and transportation, insurance services, telecom, IT, and then the revenues from intellectual property fees. For merchandise or goods that the US imports, capital goods are the #1 category, followed very closely by consumer goods, and then industrial supplies, automotive vehicles, food and beverage, and then all other remaining goods. And for the food and beverage sector, I just wanted to mention that the Specialty Food Association that was mentioned and the Fancy Food Show, we participate in that as well, because it's a great way to connect our specialty food industry to a global market, going from the US overseas as well as bringing products in. And I think it's a very good show to consider for the food industry. Can you try to advance the slides again to go a little bit further? If not, I just talk. As far as market entry strategies for companies interested in entering the US market, there's basically 2 general categories. One is the reactive approach, where companies reach out to you in Bulgaria and then actually find you through the internet, through your social media, through trade shows or whatever, and then you respond reactively. The other more approach would be to be more proactive, to actively seek market opportunities and connections. And a good way to find them is through industry trade associations, both in your country, in the countries in the European Union, as well as overseas. In the United States, I think every industry you can imagine has its own trade association. And a lot of the associations have webinars, they have ways that you can participate. You don't necessarily have to be a member, but that's one very good way to start out. And then, of course, there are the trade shows and the congresses and the forums, all the things that we don't really do right now. But the virtual events, I think, are picking up a lot more than, and people are getting a lot more comfortable with it. And so I see a lot of those connections happening even in virtual trade shows. The response is obviously not as good as going in person, but it's still a very, very good way to at least get your way and your company, your product out there. And I also think, don't forget the connections to your public sector, to your government, the commercial section of the embassies. Use their resources, connect with Evo and utilize the expertise that he already knows. And then obviously also use all of your own connections. Your customers and your suppliers may have connections that they can help further for you. The same with your bank and your accounting firm, your law firms, all of them. Use your network within your industry and explore not only the business to business, but also the business to end user B2C opportunities. I also wanted to go really quickly through some of the considerations for a successful trade transaction. First of all, you have to look how competitive your product or service is, and you can pretty much easily do a cost analysis to see if it's worthwhile investing, because exporting is always more expensive and it takes a lot more time. To benefit from it, to have your very first sale can take as long as two years or more, depending on the complexity of your product. And make sure that you are export and or import ready, that you have the expertise on hand, or you have the partners that you can work with to make this happen. So one of the most important things is always your trade finance, how to get paid, your terms of payment. You'll make sure you work with a bank that understands the market that you're going into, that you have a good relationship, somebody who can help you with currency fluctuations. And it's just important to make sure that you can get paid. Legal considerations is one of the most important things. And I know there's going to be a speaker addressing that later on, but make sure that you follow your own country's rules as to who you can sell to and what you can sell, and as well as the country that you're selling into. And then you have to qualify the country that you're partnering with, as well as your customers. Shipping and insurance, documentation, record keeping, those are technicalities that you can find a lot of private sector's resources who will help you. You have your freight forwarder, your insurance broker that can help you with all of that. But if you want to go to the next slide, please. First step would always be to look at the country, in this case, United States. Make sure that there are no legal limitations. Make sure if you have existing distributors and you find new ones, that you don't cause any issues in contexts you may already have had. Look to see if your product needs major modifications, if that's cost effective. There are standards that you have to meet in other countries that can be cost prohibitive. There are definitely tariffs, import duties, but there are all of those non-tariff barriers, and that's often seen in some of the standards that are maybe expensive to comply with. As far as legal limitations for the countries goes, I don't know if in Bulgaria you have, I'm sure you have the same qualifications that we have here, that you cannot sell to certain countries or certain individuals. They might be terrorists, they might have sanctions, whatever. You need to make sure that you look at all of that before you go. Can you go to the next slide, please? So to pre-qualify your customer or partner, you will have to do due diligence no matter what. One of them is, we call it the night party screening, which is where you would look to see if you're allowed to sell to that individual. Make sure that there are no red flags from the beginning. Make sure the person or company that wants to buy your product truly knows what they're buying, has a legitimate use for that product. And if you're talking to a partner as far as a potential representative or distributor, make sure that they understand your product, but also have a good grasp on the market in the United States so that they can be an effective partner for you. You want to do some sort of foreign company background check, a credit report, maybe through a credit insurance agency. Ivo, I don't know if your office helps with company background checks to make sure that it's a legitimate entity they're maybe partnering with. That's definitely something to consider. You can develop your own the questionnaire that you would basically send somebody if you get approached by a potential customer, either an end user or distributor. You can have a questionnaire that you send to them where you ask them for references. You ask them a little bit about, what other products they might be carrying. Are they competing with yours? Are they complementary to your products? Try to get an understanding of their grasp of the market to make sure that they really are qualified to be an effective partner for you. And again, make sure that you do some sort of credit report, that you understand the ability to pay. That's one of the most important things for any export transaction. Can you go to the next slide, please? You want to work up some sort of landed cost or quotation worksheet, which will help you determine that if your product can be competitive in that market. So for quotation worksheets, you will consider the Incoterms that you should be familiar with. The terms of payment are really important, depending if you want to be paid up front, have an open account, do letters of credit or a wire transfer. And this is something where you really want to work with your bank, and you should have your own policy internally already as to what your terms would be. The selling price of the product is really important to determine, and you have to look at all of the charges through the export transaction and then the import in the United States to make sure that you don't lose any money in your pricing. I think that's really important to work through. And I'm sure if you're already selling in other countries that you know how to do this, but you want to do that for every first-time transaction with a lot of care. And always consider the after-sales support and warranty. One of the things to consider is, I know in the United States we're pretty litigious, and so liability insurance for products are usually much higher in the United States than you would have them in Europe, for instance. I know the other way around. We tell companies that if you sell a lot to Europe, talk to your insurance company and really insure your export goods at a different rate. Usually you can get a better rate than you have in the United States. Liability insurance is an expensive thing that you have to be aware of, and you make sure that you are covered. It is a very different concept than it is in Europe, I think. If you can go to the next slide. Just want to end by saying that exporting in general always leads to economic growth. That's why every country invests in the export promotion and encourages companies to export, and there's lots of reasons for that. And I think this is on average true across all borders, that companies that export usually have high value for their workers. They have greater sales. They tend to pay higher wages. They have more capital. They are much less likely to fail than non-exporters, and have higher annual growth rates. And the reason for that is that you don't have all your eggs in one basket, right? You expand, and by expanding and selling to other countries, you are much more connected to your industry on the whole. You will see trends happening much sooner and it's not just if you export, also if you import, you have connections in other countries from which you will hear what's going on, what they see happening in their industries, and that helps you develop your growth plan as you move forward, and it helps you, they are much more likely to innovate maybe meet some challenges sooner than companies that don't export. I mean, we have horror stories where a company is convinced that they have like the best product, nobody else has it in the whole world. And then we'll take them to a trade show in another country, and all of a sudden there's 5 other companies that never realized had the same product. And in the digital economy that we have now, you can really do a lot more research and try to find out if this is really going to happen or not. So I think expanding into the United States, we are a huge market. There is lots of opportunity for all kinds of products, and we have an awful lot of market data that's publicly available. So it's relatively easy to find out, at least the market size, who else is playing in that market, which countries are supplying US products, and that data is readily available. Also, our import duties, all of that information is publicly available. If you know your harmonized tariff system number for your product, we can help you find out what it would cost you to get into this market. And I think that is in a very short synopsis on what I was going to cover today, but there are a lot of resources available. We'd be happy to share what we have. And if anybody wants the links to the different websites to get the trade data, import data, I'd be glad to send that out. So with that, I turn it over back to Elise.
Thank you so much, Tina. Thank you for the wonderful information that you shared with us about imports and exports. I think it is very important for any new business entering a new market to do their research. Like you said, make sure your product is not already widely available in this market, and do your competitiveness research. I mean, tap into all the resources that Tina just mentioned. And we're going to jump completely into, after we found out that our product, maybe it's not that widely available, what happens next? So let's talk about business communication strategies, how to successfully form those business relationships. And for that, we have Dr. Eugenia Krimmel. She's an experienced certified business English coach. She taught financial professionals English communication skills in Turkey, Spain, and here in the US, and she holds a doctorate in education. Driven by her passion for helping people, she takes pride in providing the best possible business English program for improving clients' English fluency for career and business success. She runs her own company, Universal Cultural Language Services, to teach non-native English-speaking college students and professionals. So I will want to turn the floor over to Dr. Eugenia Krimmel.
Hey, thank you so much, Elise. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And it's an honor to be here and to speak with all of you. I'm learning so much from everyone right now. And you might think to yourself, why do we have an English speaker here or an English teacher? So when Elise and I spoke about this webinar, she had mentioned to me that the key to successful business is communication. And so for that reason, I'm going to present to you some communication strategies, both overt and covert. So overt being open, the words we use and that kind of thing, but also some of the covert being the sort of subtleties of culture and expectations. So with that, we'll move to the next slide. Hopefully, yeah. Can we move to there we are. All right, so in the very short time that I'll be speaking to you, we'll take a quick look at effective cross-cultural business communication strategies in general, US-Bulgarian business norms. We'll take a look at the similarities and the differences, business English email writing. So then I get down into the actual language, which is what I do as a profession, and teach business writing. And so I'll show you a quick example of how you can improve your communication. We'll also look at Business English idioms. And again, just to let you know that these idioms are there. Tina just used one in her last presentation. She said, don't have all your eggs in one basket. I wrote that down because, you know, you may, as a English as a second language person or a new third or fourth language person, you may know all of those words, but you may not have known what that expression is. And basically it is to diversify and don't keep everything in one place. So we'll talk about those briefly, and then I'll tell you very briefly about the business program that I have. But I also want to commend everyone who's presenting today who's English, their language is not English as the first language. It's really difficult to present in a language that's not your native language. So everyone is doing such a wonderful job, and they make it look seamlessly because they're doing it so well, but it is difficult. So, so that's congrats to everyone there. So if we can, we'll move to the next slide. I used to live in and work in Turkey and in Madrid, so I've been in those shoes where I've had to present or speak in a language that wasn't my own, and that can be very difficult. So we're going to take a quick look at some effective cross-cultural business communication strategies, and the first one is language. Language itself. English is the language of business, as you all know. Or realizing it's the lingua franca of our day, or the, you know, used to be the French language, and now it is English. And so my suggestion to you, if you want to do business in the United States from Bulgaria, offer English translations of all documents. I've heard others say, I can send you that English document if you like, you have it at the ready, because we do expect it to be in English as Americans, but it is also the language of business. So if you can have things already translated into English, that would be beneficial for your communication with American companies. Website. This may be a little bit unusual, but you should have an actual translation of your website in English and not using Google Translate. Google Translate is inaccurate about 80–85% of the time. And you don't want to make one of those critical errors that happen sometimes. Some of you may have read that Kentucky Fried Chicken, for example, went over to China, and the slogan was "finger licking good," which means, you know, it's so tasty. But in China, the translator went over to "eat your fingers off," and that wasn't exactly what they wanted to say. So you've got to be careful. Sometimes the Google Translate is more literal, and so it is best and it's advised to actually build your website in English, and then refer to it or send that to your counterparts. And another communication thought through language is to learn idioms of the day, similar to what we just talked about. So there are lots of websites where you can, you know, learn these idioms, and we'll discuss those a little bit further. But Americans do speak in idioms. We don't even know it. I mean, it's so much part of our language that we often don't realize that. And then you, as a second language or, you know, non-native speaker, may hear something and think, you know, what does that mean? So you may need to decipher a little bit before you move on, or before you understand fully what we're trying to say. So we'll move on to the next slide then, please. Thank you. Another aspect of, or another strategy, I should say, is to create a culture of effective meetings. So face-to-face or virtual meetings are essential for communication. When you see the person, like you're seeing me now, you can see my facial expressions, you can see my hand gestures, which may also have some cultural, cross-cultural implications, but it's still very important to be able to negotiate those meanings of the gestures and so forth that we have when we communicate. It's also more effective because sometimes when we write an email, the intent isn't always there. Even an American to an American, sometimes emails break down the communication because the wording, you know, the sender knows what they're saying, but the receiver is reading it differently. So with a face-to-face communication, you can ask clarification questions right then and there. Also recognize and adapt to some cultural differences. So learning about the other culture as far as everything from rituals and rules within a meeting, who can make the decisions, what their values are, and then also communicate those common goals that you may have. So if you're in a meeting or you're starting a business partnership, what are the goals that you want to achieve? And maybe those are incremental. Initially, we just want to establish a partnership to build a relationship, which is always the first key. And then we'll talk about import export, or we'll talk about the next stages. So, but you want to continually communicate those goals to each other as you're in your meetings. And then it's also suggested to have some quick real-time communication. So whether you use Skype or one of the other many, instant message kind of communications, in case something breaks down, in case someone from your company is traveling, and you want to have, there may be something gone wrong, like in, COVID, you're stuck in an airport or something. You want to have a means of communicating with each other quickly and in real time. Not to do business, but to build that relationship and also to navigate some difficulties. So it's another strategy for creating that culture of meetings. Next slide, please. Okay, great. And then looking at some of the business norms from US and Bulgaria, some of the similarities that I have found doing some research, talking to Elise a little bit. I have yet to come to Bulgaria. It's on my list, definitely. Darn COVID, but hopefully we'll get there soon. But some of the similarities we have is that we're direct. If you do business in other parts of the world, you find out there's some cultures that are pretty indirect and take time. But we are direct. We're pretty explicit. We both value relationships as a critical part of doing business, and that they need to develop over time. So we recognize that. Both cultures value punctuality to both the virtual and live meetings. That is expected. And anything later than 15 minutes is kind of considered rude. So again, one of those subtle cultural norms that we have to get used to. And having lived in places like Turkey and Spain and so forth, and doing a lot of work with people from other parts of the, say, Central and South America, I know that time is more relaxed. And so I had to kind of get over my Americanisms and allow for that. But, that beyond 15 minutes, in Turkey, it'd be sometimes an hour, when somebody said, well, they would meet me, and then, an hour later, and they thought nothing of it. And I was fuming. So, so these kind of things are important to learn, but we have that similarity with the Bulgarian norms as well. And we get directly down to business. And that's another idiom, get down to business. So some of the things that I have found to think about, something that you may be looking for as some differences in our business meetings, we're much more sort of a friendly atmosphere in meetings. We like to establish that for openness and trust. But it's my understanding that in Bulgaria, your meetings are a little more formal. And, so just so we're not trying to be flippant or trying to be, too casual. It is what we value as a way of building trust. So keep that in mind. In the US, we think aloud in meetings and in emails sometimes, and we make decisions, pretty quickly. So whereas in Bulgaria, and of course we do have a hierarchy, but sometimes we do think about these things while we're negotiating. Whereas I understand in Bulgaria, a senior or personnel or manager makes the decision after discussing it with others, and then may come back. So they're not necessarily talking during the meeting or thinking out loud in the meeting. And then the last point is that we do value quick deadlines, and we like things done, as soon as possible, possibly yesterday in some ways. And Bulgaria seems a little less deadline oriented, and they're not in a hurry to be able to make those decisions. So again, general norms, not to be stereotypical, but look for that and see if there's a tension or some sort of misunderstanding. And it could be something like this, something very covert, very subtle. Next slide, please. Okay, so this can also happen, a sort of a cross understanding in our email writing. And when it comes to writing, wording is very, very important, but it's also what is in the email. And more recently, a business email has sort of shifted from the longer format that they had been, almost akin to an academic paragraph, and to something a little more getting down to business, a little more straightforward. So the salutation, the hello or what have you, as you greet, know whether you are greeting somebody formally or informally. Dear whomever is formal, last name, title, and last name. Use that as often as you can until the person says, you may call me Jim, or you may call me Mary. And then you can say, you know, dear Mary, or hello Mary, something like that. But you want to make sure that you know your audience well. When I get an email from somebody who doesn't know me, and they just say, hey Eugenia, or hi Eugenia, that kind of startles me. It's just too familiar too quickly. So you want to be sure you have that balance, and always start out with a formal, and then you can build to the informal. Your body of the text should convey the main meaning of the message, and you sort of want to look for these three parts next time you write an email. Introduction sentence of the text topic. Don't just jump into demands or, you know, this is what's happening. What is the topic of your email? I am writing to talk about, or to discuss, or to inform you. And there are lists of expressions you can use and to start out your sentences. You can find those online. 1 or 2 points in separate short paragraphs. Typically an English paragraph is 5 sentences, but you can definitely use 1 or 2 in a business email these days. And then lastly, have a conclusion statement, something that you either call to action, or you know, like I will call you next week, or, you know, please inform me when you're ready, something like that. And then lastly, your signature. Your signature, again, can be formal or informal. For the most part, it's usually set into a more formal way in the email. But you also want to make sure that your signature has any information a reader might need to be able to contact you. Name, your title, which is very important because they want to make sure they get your name right, address, phone, and email. Next slide, please. I'm going to show you an example of an email that wasn't quite up to what we would expect to be able to be effective. So this is an email from a Bulgarian business person to an American. Dear John, you can find part of the information about technical requirements of widget factory heating system. The Word document is in Bulgarian. If you need, I will ask for translation. I would like to ask you for any updates from your side because we don't have a lot of time before the deadline. I'm not really happy when I have to use my contacts and good reputation for nothing. I expect from your side to be active. By the way, I am still waiting for information about your visit. And then a question mark. Best, Jane. That was it. And this is actually real. And so right now, as an American business person, it breaks down that communication. It's very aggressive. It's kind of forward. And it doesn't have some of the elements that I would expect in an email. So it's almost like I'm feeling some anger when I read this, and not so much, you know, they're mad at me, but at the situation, the frustration. So next slide, I'm going to show you some suggestions to soften that and make it a little bit more relation building. Okay. So this is a better rewrite for that. So learn their name, because again, this is a business communication. So dear Mr. Smith, I know we're informal, and I mentioned this earlier in a meeting. However, when it comes to our business writing, especially emails, we want to keep it formal until we are invited to make it informal. you know, or you've built a relationship over years and years. And sometimes I may say, you know, after I've known someone for a while, you know, dear Mr. Smith, may I call you John? And at that point, you know, if they agree, then I can start calling them that. So, so formal greeting, topic sentence. I'm writing to learn about any updates on our project and details about your upcoming visit. So the updates about the project and the details of your upcoming visit. That's the topic of this email, which we just read above. First topic, again, keeping it short. Attached, you will find the widget factory heating systems technical requirements. I will gladly send you an English version of this Bulgarian Word document if you do not trust your internet browser's translation. That's fine too, or you can just say that you will gladly send the English version, or you can even attach it if you have that. But if you don't have it at the ready, this is one way that you can do that. And oftentimes we don't trust our translations. So continuing that topic, but on another paragraph, because it's slightly different. And again, notice it's only one sentence, but because the project deadline is fast approaching, as soon as possible, please share any updates and details you and your company have decided. We look forward to finalizing this phase of the project on time. So there I'm indicating that, you know, the need for the deadline, but I have done this in a more polite and a more softer way of approaching that. Second topic, I'm wondering if you could please send me your travel plans to prepare for the upcoming visit, and thank you in advance. Notice the ending, and I also have my title. Next slide. Okay. So this is just a quick example, and I believe you all will be getting the this PowerPoint, so you can see some of the wording, you know, that you can use. So would it be possible instead of I need this? You know, there are various ways of saying it. We Americans have certain ways of saying things in an indirect and polite manner in our emails that you may not hear so much in a meeting. Next slide. And if I'm not mistaken, our next slide is going to be on the idioms. That's correct, yes. And so there are two types of idioms. There are phrasal verbs. So these are verbs in a sentence that have a phrase and a preposition together. I mean, you don't need to know that. Other than you will hear things like, we need to step it up to meet the deadline. So to step it up is a phrasal verb. It's a verb that has more than one word, and it means to hurry. So you may also hear a sentence or read a sentence that says, if you have no other questions, I'll wrap up this meeting. To wrap up something is to finish it. So again, you may understand all those words, but how are we using it in our expression? And then other expressions like let's get the ball rolling means to start a process, or having information at your fingertips means something's readily available. So learning business idioms will help you to communicate better with your American counterparts. Next slide. Okay, so today we discussed very briefly the effective cross-cultural communication strategies, some US-Bulgarian business norms to be aware of and to look for, some specific business English email writing improvements, and then discussed being aware of business English idioms. Next slide, please. I want to thank everyone for listening today and attending the webinar in general, because this is such a valuable thing to have the relationship between the US and Bulgaria. And I was just thrilled when Elise asked me to participate in this. So if you are interested all in learning more of business English writing, I do have a course for English for financial professionals. I teach you the micro habits of English learning to improve your English on a daily basis. So next slide, please. You are more than welcome to contact me via LinkedIn. I'm there on the LinkedIn website. I also have my email, so you are welcome to give me a call, let me know. Thank you very much, and best of luck to all of you, and happy holidays. Back to you, Elise.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jeannie. I'm sure all those tips were really great, and a lot of folks will ask for presentation, and we will follow up with everyone that registered today. They will receive an email tomorrow with all the PDF presentations that our presenters are talking to us today. From business English, we are moving on to legal pitfalls for startup companies in US. Now that we've overcome the English professional communication, let's dive right into the legal challenges that a new business might encounter. And for that, we have Dobrina Austin, who is the founder and managing partner of Austin Law Group, a full-service immigration law firm. Dobrina represents multinational companies, tech startups, individual entrepreneurs, and other entities before the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service, Department of Labor, U.S. embassies, and consulates. As a former immigration attorney for Infosys, Dobrina has direct experience with creating and supervising immigration programs and processes for multinational companies with significant overseas operations. In addition, Dobrina advises clients on strategies to overcome immigration denials and appealing cases in the federal court. So it is my pleasure to turn it over to Dobrina.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you for having me today. Can you hear me well? Okay, great. So I just want to make of course, the legal disclaimer that anything that I say today shouldn't be taken for a legal advice. It's for informational purposes only. And I will try not to go over the 15 minutes, but we'll see how that's going to work. So let's start. So next slide, please. All right, so today we're going to go over a few topics. I'm going to talk about your team for success. How do you get to the United States? Obviously, that's really important. Business structures in the United States for startup companies, and how to protect your brand. And I'll give you a couple tips at the end. So let's get started. Next slide. Next. I'm missing one page. So the previous, yeah, there you go. Thank you. So your team for success. So the first person that you will have to engage in the United States, and that's super important. And it's not going to be your lawyer. That's the second person. That will be either an accountant, a bookkeeper, or a CPA. So what is the difference between a bookkeeper? Bookkeeper, you can engage one right at the beginning. They will usually do your books. They will enter transactions on daily basis, weekly basis, but they will not be able to provide you necessarily a tax advice or business planning. A CPA, a little bit more advanced, actually more advanced than a bookkeeper. They're actually licensed in the United States, and they can act as a business advisor. They can prepare your tax strategy and represent you in front of the IRS. So it is super important that, you know, the second you come to the United States with the idea to expand from Bulgaria to the United States, to engage with a CPA, a bookkeeper, or if things get more complicated, definitely a tax attorney. And that will lead me to the second most important person in the United States. That will be your lawyer. So in terms of your lawyer, and I'm not biased at all here, in terms of your lawyer, you might actually need a few lawyers. Initially, you will need a business attorney who can explain, you know, how to register your company, who can guide you through, you know, the different initial legal loopholes. And then once you set up your business, then you might have to retain a different lawyer with different specialty. Like, for example, you might need a customs lawyer. Not every lawyer in the United States practices customs law. You might need immigration lawyer. Not every lawyer here practices immigration law. So as your business expands, you will need to hire different lawyers who can help you with with your particular legal issue. One thing you shouldn't do is go online and register your business through online technology companies. I call them online technology companies because it's easier than getting a lawyer. It's cheaper, that is true, but it's not effective. And it's not effective because technically you're not represented by a lawyer, and you will not receive all the documents that you will need. And there might be some legal consequences down the road that will cost you way more later than you will spend initially to actually do it the right way. So my advice to startups, it's always talk to a lawyer and so that you can get your basic documents correct, and then from there you can grow with your company. And especially that applies to if you want to use your company, your startup, to procure an immigration status in the United States. Because all of these documents will be presented to the immigration services, and you wanna look and sound credible. Online companies that you might register your company with are not necessarily credible to that extent that you can convince the immigration services that you're really interested in setting up a business here. Next slide. All right, so you have to come to the United States. So how do you do that? For Bulgarian citizens who want to enter the United States, we need a visa. So for the most common one, it's the B1, B2 visa for business and tourism. Now, the B1 is a non-immigrant visa for persons who want to enter the United States temporarily for business, register a company, attend conferences, meet with clients, and etc. You cannot work with that visa in the United States. B2 non-immigrant visa is for persons who want to enter the United States temporarily for tourism, visit Disneyland, Las Vegas, Statue of Liberty, and etc. Now, sometimes people think that this is the same visa. Well, technically, it is the same in your passport. Your passport, the visa stamp is gonna say B1/B2. But when you come to the United States at the border, you have to tell them what is your purpose. One of the most common issue that at least I face is with people who come in and say, "Oh, I'm just here for tourism," and then the second they enter, and they put them with the B2, and then the second they enter, they start opening companies, meeting with people, and so far, and so forth. So they basically are doing exactly what they're not supposed to be doing under that B2. And then later on, when they want to continue or change their status to an investor visa, then we face a lot of issues with that. So point is, when you're entering the United States, you have to be specific and tell them exactly why are you coming, business or tourism. The second one that sometimes people utilize either when they come to the United States or when they're still outside the United States is the E2 investor visa. So the E2 investor visa allows an individual to enter and work inside the United States based on an investment they will be controlling while inside the United States. The E2 visa is good for 3 months to 5 years and can be extended indefinitely depending on how successful your company is. So for example, you're sitting in Bulgaria or any other or a country that has a treaty with the United States, and you want to come to the United States and start a business. You can do that under the E2 with a significant amount of investment. Currently, there is no specific number. $100,000 is sort of the golden number, but that will depend on the type of business you would want to start here. And the third one is the L1A new office visa. The L1A is basically you have a company outside the United States and you want to open up an office, an extension of that company in the United States. So both companies have to be active at the same time. This is the so-called managerial visa. You will come in, register a company, and start your activities here in the United States with some kind of investment. And the initial visa will be given for 1 year, and then you can apply for an extension depending on how successful that 1 year was for you. These are the three most common visas for people who want to come in and basically start a business, register a business, or just visit the United States. Of course, we can talk more about more permanent options, but that's not the topic of this webinar. So let's go to the next slide. So once you get here, assuming everything goes well with your visa, you enter the United States, and you're ready to register a company. So in the United States, we have different types of entities that you can explore, and you definitely need the advice of your first two friends, your CPA and your attorney. The reason is, the different entities come with different tax implications, different obligations, and you just want to make sure that the entity will actually, you will have the right entity for your company and activities that you want to have in the United States. So one of the most common entity, which is not recommended, but some people fall into by default, is general partnership. So general partnership is a business arrangement by which two people enter into an agreement, and they jointly own the business. Now, this is not a preferred structure, even though it's very easy to form. It's not preferred structure because you have unlimited liability. So if something goes wrong and you end up in court, they can actually go after your personal assets, and you do not want to do that. You're also liable for your partner's actions, in a sense where, if your partner does something wrong and you have nothing to do with that, you're still liable. So general partnerships are not preferred business structure. Limited liability, it's a business structure where the owners are not personally liable for companies' debts or liabilities. So this one is the most common business structure for startups in the United States. Anybody can form a company in the United States. You don't have to be a resident. You don't have to be a citizen. You can be a visitor, and you can form a company in the United States. As you see, this one actually has a level of protection. It protects your personal assets. If something goes south, they will go after the company's assets, not your personal assets, at least initially. And the C corporation, it's under the United States federal tax law, refers to any corporation that is taxed separately from its owner. So you will get this double taxation. So you'll get the taxation for your company and on a personal level. Generally speaking, a lot of people think that this is the best structure, or somebody tells them that, oh, they have to go with C corporation. But for this is good for high growth tech startups, and because it allows them different options in terms of fundraising and so forth. Generally, it's not good for startups, but some people go with it. It just depends on your activity and on your future activities as well. And there's one more which I didn't include, is the S corporation, but that you cannot form that as a foreign national. You have to be either a U.S. resident or U.S. citizen. So therefore, that's not in the PowerPoint here. Next slide. And this is just a sum up for the business structure. You have to define your business. That's the first legal challenge that you will face. You will have to decide that with your tax attorney, tax person, the CPA, bookkeeper, tax attorney, and your business attorney. Now, one question that I always get, especially from startups, or from people who are outside the United States and would want to come to the United States, it's like, well, where do I find these people? Like, how do I know, who to call, who to talk to, who can help me, who is good? And I always tell them, first thing is, do not ask your friends that did the same thing 10 years ago. Laws change, it's very dynamic. You want to be up to date with all of the regulations, the current regulations. So generally speaking, you can get very good leads and I should say actually referrals For example, from the US-Bulgarian Chamber of Commerce. That's why you become a member of such organizations, including the US-Bulgarian Chamber of Commerce, because with their wide reach and with their connections, they can provide you with the right referral that they know that will help you and your business to succeed. So it's very important to start having these connections, to start getting involved and getting yourself a membership in the different organizations that will help you succeed in the United States. Okay, so that's not in this slide, but I just wanted to share that because it's a very common question, especially for for somebody who is not currently in the United States. Next slide, please. Okay, the next most common question is, where do I incorporate? So you come in and you say, okay, I really like New York. I want to do business in New York, and it makes sense for me, for my family, for my product, my services, whatever the case might be. So sometimes people will be like, well, but I heard that Delaware is great. So can I incorporate in Delaware? Yes, you can. Anybody can incorporate in Delaware. However, of course, there pros that the state of Delaware provides businesses or business formations. Like they have a very well established court system. So if something goes wrong, you will get a lot of assistance with with the legal procedures and the court system. You have very flexibility for structuring your corporation. It has greater privacy and some tax benefits. So these are the most, sort of the most famous reasons why people want to incorporate in Delaware. While this works for big companies and other entities that have wider reach, this is not necessarily good for a small company or a startup. And the reason is because you can incorporate in Delaware, but if your business is headquartered in New York, obviously, you have to register your business in New York as well. And then you have to pay annual franchise tax in both in the Delaware and in the state you are headquartered. And you have to follow reporting requirements for the two states. So and therefore you have to have a very good CPA, doing all this for you and advising you with the right rules and regulations and everything that entails when you have a registration in Delaware and headquartered in, let's say, New York or any other place. So for a small business, for a startup, this is pretty burdensome. But if Delaware is something that you want to do and you want to incorporate there, regardless of where your headquarters are, you have that option as well. Next slide. Okay, so you came to the United States, you met your friends, remember, the CPA, the attorney, and so forth. You registered your entity, either the headquarters, Delaware, both, maybe other states, depending on what you want to do, and you're good to go. Well, you have to protect yourself. You have to protect your brand, I should say, or your intellectual property. So intellectual property for startups includes using copyrights, trademarks, and patents. Safeguarding the IP is much easier at the beginning of your business than at the end. Well, not at the end, but like throughout the business. Or if your business explodes and then suddenly you realize that you haven't protected your logo and or your website, and somebody infringes upon, then you're in a pretty bad situation, and you will be spending thousands of dollars to go after the entity or the person who is trying to infringe with your intellectual property. IP protection puts legal checks on your competition, preventing others from infringing and profiting from your profit. So the thing that I was telling you about, why you have to protect yourself. And also, it's very important to protect yourself, especially if you're doing business with American companies, because again, that adds credibility, and it also tells them that they won't get into some kind of litigation down the road if somebody tries to infringe your product, a logo, or a website. So with that, with the IP, this is definitely an area where you have to look for an attorney who actually specializes in intellectual property law, and that's not everybody. So have to be very careful who you choose in order to protect your brand. Okay, next. So typically, how to it involves, startup protection for, as I said, inventions, logos, business name, and software. Different types of IP protection apply to the various works. Patents will be protected on innovation. Copyrights would protect software, and trademarks would protect a startup brand or a logo. Okay, next slide. And I think that's my last slide. So there's just a few tips for success. Follow the applicable tax law. So I don't know what it is with people coming from outside the United States, but usually the first question people ask me, and that's from any other country, is like, do I have to pay taxes? Yes, you do. So you have to pay taxes and follow tax laws. Do not use generic contracts, documents found on Google to conduct your business. I know it's very common. I always have people saying, oh, but I found this on Google, this contract, it seems pretty good. Well, most likely it isn't. So do not use just ready documents or a document that your friend used like 10 years ago. Do not use ship-only services to form your company. So again, back to the online tech companies that provide these services, do not use them. Engage with experienced professionals who can give you the proper advice, and ask questions, ask a lot of questions. That's why you're gonna be paying these people that you're gonna hire to ask questions and get answers. If you hire an online platform, there's nobody there to answer your questions. And the last one is choose the proper legal entity from the very beginning. So with that, I conclude my presentation, and I give back to Elise.
Thank you so much, Dobrina. Thank you for running through the slides so literally, but it is a very valuable information, especially from a legal standpoint. I cannot emphasize more on what you just said. Make sure you consult with an attorney. If you're using any platforms, please be careful. They cannot do what an actual real attorney can do for you. So invest your money wisely. Thank you. And I know we are running out of time, but I want to go right away to the next topic, which is how Bulgarian-based small and medium enterprises can acquire a United States presence and expand in this huge market. And for that, we have Tom Alec, who is the Global Business Development Manager with All Fulfillment Direct, specialized in EU companies looking to distribute their products in the US and Canada. His European Union and US background allow him a better understanding of the international market needs and fill up the gap of the cultural differences. In addition, Tom has 15 years of experience in manufacturing and logistics with major world corporations as Shelter Logic Group and Thermos Pass Inc. in diverse roles combining vision, branding, client relationship management, innovation. Tom?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Great. Thank you, Elise, for having me. I have to say I was thrilled when I was offered to present at the chamber, the Bulgarian chamber. I do strongly believe that the Bulgarian startup and SMEs have a lot to offer and showcase. By their know-how and their expertise that is largely untapped, as mentioned by Mr. Konstantinov and Mrs. Kachakova. This is a huge market, and there is a lot that the startup and the SMEs in Bulgaria can get a piece of it. And I will say that the economy in Bulgaria, it's very dynamic. And as we know that 70% of the private sector is part of that GDP, I will say that should take advantage of the income tax treaty agreement between Bulgaria and United States. So that being said, I want, before I start my presentation about AFD, I want to say that there are a lot of preconceived idea of coming and doing business in the United States for international companies in general is complicated and expensive, which is not the case at all. Those are really preconceived idea. It is much easier than we can think. It is, I will say, what AFD does is AFD offer a turnkey solution and a presence in the United States. So we have fulfillment center, and we've been in business for 23 years. We have about 130 square feet warehouse, which is about 10,000 square meter. And basically, we are the base, the extension of the business in the United States. We represent all those companies here in the United States. So by fulfilling their orders, so obviously the customer can be a B2B, business to business, or business to consumers. We take care of the pick, pack, ship, and obviously getting those products to the final customers. I will say that we specialize in that niche. 70% of our customers are from the EU. So 27 countries. We have customers in France, we have customers in Sweden, we have customers in all over Europe. And it is obviously offering you to do business in the US from the comfort of your office in Bulgaria. So you can use the different channels. There are different channels that are open to you. The channels are obviously the big box stores, okay, where we can obviously ship the pallets. You have the marketplaces with all the platforms where you can showcase your product. I'm talking about obviously Amazon, Shopify, Etsy, etc. And we also can work with your dealer network. Your dealer network, those are the specialty stores that basically can be in different industries. It is much easier when we can think. I mean, to have a US presence. So those are right now on the slide, all the different services that we offer that I will suggest that you take a look deeper later on. But if you can go to the next slide, please. What AFD service include? The service of AFD is basically just to let you know that we are a full service logistic platform, which means we can do it all for you. I mean, obviously we will work with you as we have a range of partners that we work with, which means if you have your own ocean freight forwarder, or if you want us to help you to get a freight forwarder, we can do that for you. We have also a partner in as custom brokers that will take care of the duties for you. We have a partner as trucker to bring your goods to us. And as well, we also have the carriers that we work with, USPS, the UPS, and FedEx. Those also are the carriers that will basically ship your product to the final customers. So what I want to say here is that getting to the US market, it is something that it is much more easier that can be done. And obviously, I want to go back to two important major things that you need to do is that you need to surround yourself with a lawyer, that's for sure, number one, I would say, as well as a tax specialist. Those are the two things that you need in the United States. And you can start doing this from your home country. And once this take off, eventually start to have an office. But the advantage of this solution is right now is that you can have, this base AFD as a based in United States without the cost attached to it, like the real estate or getting employees, at least to start your business. The other thing the other things I will say as well, this is really at a low cost and at no risk as well. This is no string attached. What I mean by that is that if you hire AFD for being your fulfillment center, there is no contract that ties you as other. Why? Because we ourselves an SME. As I said before, we've been in business for 23 years. We're a small enterprise. We are 25 employees, and what makes it different than the big corporation is that we are much more flexible to all the startups and the SMEs that, of course, have limited resources. One thing that also we do is we adjust to our clients. That means we can work with them EDI with all the new technologies, so electronic data interchange, if they want to integrate, or if they want to work on, I don't know, for example, a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet where we will process their orders, we also do that. So basically, we are extremely flexible to offer, the solution to at least start, your first step in the United States. And we are in that niche because we believe that the startups and the SMEs are basically the base of the economy worldwide. So I definitely can be, answering all the questions and also, help you to find all the partners that you're going to need to have here in the US to be effective. We also cover Canada. We do ship from our facility, which is in Connecticut. And the advantage of Connecticut is that we are only a couple hours away from New York City with no cost of, obviously, the real estate's cost of the New York area as well. And we are also at an hour and a half away from Boston, which is really a major location. Beside this, I will say that we are also working with partners like lawyers, tax, specialists. That it is important because if you do business from your home country, there are not going to be any federal taxes, but you will have state taxes, and that's why you need to have a CPA, a tax specialist, as well as a lawyer to have those contract and agreements, wrapped to protect yourself. Beside this, it is much easier than we can think. You can ship, obviously, starting with LTL shipment, which means will be only a small pallet, so small quantity, as well as after moving to container load, they can be 20-foot containers, 40-foot containers, So we handle all size of goods. We are specialized in home goods, but we do all type of different products. The only thing that we don't do is the food, the perishable items. But beside this, we are full service logistic platform. So I wanted to make it brief because, it's a lot to cover. Obviously, there is a lot to say about logistic and how it works, because obviously we have to get into the different Incoterms. For example, if you ship from Bulgaria to United States, remember that you're going to have to ship as, I don't want to get too technical, but you will have to ship on a DDP, which means duty paid, because we are basically your extension of your business here in the United States. If you sell from Bulgaria to a final customer, you will sell on EXW. So those all technical sides, obviously I can help you with that, with also the HA's code for the customs for different products. So we are, we've been doing this for the past 3 years, which means 70% of our customers are international and 30% are domestics. So we know the ins and outs. And even though if you decide to, work with a bigger facility, I'd be more than happy to help you and answer all your questions. That's, I'm trying to make it short. So all the service that you have here, AFD services, what's the fulfillment is obviously we get your goods, we unload them, we do the count, we control, there is a quality control, we control if all the goods are in there, we store them, we do, obviously we provide you with a software that is called a 3PL that gives you an access 24/7 to your inventory, and also you can be tracking, all the packages, and you will know when they reach the final customers. We do also the packaging. We will package those products. We'll prepare those orders. Then we will take care of the UPS, shipping. And of course, it's extremely important. We also going to take care of the returns. The returns usually represent 5%, no more than 5% in general. But it is extremely important to have a base in the US for 2 reasons. Because the consumer in the United States need peace of mind. They need an 800 number in the US that they would know that somebody will pick up the phone and answer their questions. And as well as also, they don't want to be confronted to the fact, oh, if I don't want it, I want to send it back. How am I going to get my money back? So if you appear as being based in a foreign country, wherever it doesn't matter where in the world, and then the first thing that the consumer will think about, oh, where am I going to send it back? How am I going to get my money back? So those are kind of turn off. If you decide to sell in the United States, you must have a base. That's what I would recommend as well. I will take the next slide, please. So these are all the platforms, of course, the big box stores and all the platform we partner with, that we work with. So like, for example, Wayfair that you have on the right-hand side. Wayfair is well known as being the biggest, online e-commerce website for home goods. So they are our partners. We have a lot of their customers in our warehouse. You have different, Ace, for example, for hardware as our store. Those are specialty stores that we work with as well. So a lot of these, platforms are our customers. So that gives you really a wide range of companies that you can be working with. Can I take the next slide, please? And this is also the e-commerce platform, which means if you decide, for example, to put your product on one of those platforms, Shopify, Etsy, Amazon, etc., we will obviously work with you, and we work with them on EDI. Obviously, that will be the easiest way, but we also can do it on emails, which means with batch orders on a spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet. So we really adjust to you. You have to know that this is really accessible to everybody. What we do is basically you ship your product to us, and then once you have basically hooked up with those platforms, we will receive the order, and we will prepare that order and pick, pack, and ship to the final customers. And let's say the final customer decide to return it, we will take care of it. It will be sent to us back. What we do, obviously, we do 2 things. We will check it to see if it's not defective, and if it's not defective, we put it back on the shelf. And if defective, we will notify you that it's been defective, and we will take care of it in accordance to your requirement. If you want us to throw it away or keep it on the side for your next visit, etc., etc. So we work with all the platform that gives you a wide, really range of, customers that, based on the United States, being, really in the comfort of your office in your home town, in your home city, anywhere around the globe. So I will take the next slide. This is a company that we work with. That's a reference. A company that we work in. They're based in Sweden, and they sell rugs. So you can check them out. There's their website. I have hundreds of these letters that I can provide you as well. That we have companies in different part of EUs. I think that Bulgaria, I was really thrilled when Elise offered me to present, because I strongly believe that Bulgaria have a huge potential that's really untapped, and that a lot of companies in Bulgaria, with especially the advantage and the edge that they have versus the rest of the EU, is by, obviously, we all know about the qualified workforce and the quality of the product that can be made in Bulgaria at inexpensive labor, compare Germany, compare France, compare England, that give you a huge edge on these countries. And especially that also the Eastern European market is really an untapped market, because it's new to the American consumers. And I think it will be very attractive. So we can offer you, offer you a U.S. presence here in the U.S. by, distributing your goods in Connecticut. Obviously, that will be a distribution that will be all over United States, including Canada.
Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you so much. I know we're running out of time. We will share all the presentations, but thank you, Tom. I would like to jump ahead to our last guest. We saved the best for last, because we want you to hear from a person who has made a progress, has made a success, and really has shown us how to conduct a business and what way. So it is my pleasure to introduce to all of you Pavel Kolarov. Pavel is an accomplished business management professional with over 25 years of experience in business consulting, brand management, and market research. He currently serves as the CEO of Trimona Foods, makers of Trimona Bulgarian yogurt. Prior to joining Trimona, he built and led his own food and beverage consulting practice. His previous experience also includes Kraft Foods, Campbell Soup, RRI, and FFB North America. He holds an MBA from Fordham University and MIM from Thunderbird Graduate School of International Management. He lives in New York City with his wife and 3 children. It is my pleasure to welcome Pavel, and he will tell us more about the success of Trimona.
Elise, thank you very much for the introduction. I hope everyone is still has 10-15 minutes to spare. I'll try to be very quick. I'm very thankful to you for including me in this forum today. It's I've actually learned quite a bit myself from the previous presenters. I think this is all really, really good information, no matter if you're based in the US, whether you're based in Bulgaria or anywhere else in the world. These are all some very, very sort of important aspects that everyone should know about. So very helpful stuff. And I'm sure that anyone who has questions can come back and ask all of the presenters to give them some more information. So thanks very much for inviting me again. Just a few quick things about Trimona Bulgarian yogurt. We are actually an American company. I should note that we are incorporated in New York, but we have actually very strong ties to the state of Pennsylvania, or the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, I believe it is called, because our products are currently manufactured in Winfield, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour north of Harrisburg. Our milk comes from Pennsylvania, cows. Our packaging comes also from a company called Griner Packaging, which is an Austrian company, but their factory happens to be in Pennsylvania, and so do our cartons. So we happen to have very strong ties to Pennsylvania, as well as, of course, Bulgaria. And on kind of the Bulgarian side, we make a perishable product, a yogurt. So even though some companies have tried before, it's rather difficult to manufacture yogurt in Bulgaria and then ship it, refrigerate it, and distribute in America. So that's why we make it in the US. But what we do is we get a lot of our cultures from Bulgaria. We also, we just launched a new line of superfood sort of functional yogurts that happen to be in distribution in Whole Foods in Pennsylvania and the rest of the Mid-Atlantic region of Whole Foods. And the superfoods we actually buy from a Bulgarian company called Smart Organic. And the cultures we buy from another Bulgarian company called Probiotic. And we also happen to outsource pretty much all of our accounting, bookkeeping, and design, and some of our marketing to Bulgarian firms. I think what has happened, it's been happening for a long, long time, but the pandemic probably accelerated that in a big way, was that, you know, especially with Zoom calls and everything else being virtual, it almost doesn't matter where you are, as long as you know, you know the subject matter, you know what you need to do, and you know the right people too, and the right tools are available to you. So with that in mind, you know, we've been working with quite a few Bulgarian firms on very many different aspects of our business. So while we're not a Bulgarian firm per se, we have very strong ties to Bulgaria, and we outsource quite a bit of our processes and ingredients to Bulgarian companies. So on that picture, that's me and Atanas Valev. I have to say, I got to give Nasko some love here. He founded the company and he actually developed the product. So I'm kind of walking a little bit in his footsteps. You know, he's great at not just product development, but anything that has to do with healthy living, healthy foods, as well as healthy cuisine in general. What I bring to the table is a little bit more on the commercial side. As Elise said, my background is more in food marketing, sales, manufacturing, consulting, and so on and so forth. I also spent a little bit of time, well, actually not a bit of time, almost like 6 years advising companies from the UK and later from around the EU on how to penetrate the US market in sort of the food and drink arena. So obviously I've kind of, that was my consulting hat, if you will. So I understand and appreciate a lot of the challenges that many companies, not just in the food business, but beyond, have or faced with when it comes to the US market. So next slide, please. And this is, with my consulting hat on, I should say, this is probably the one diagram, the one slide that I've presented the most and have had the most sort of questions on over the years. The thing about the US market is that it's especially for food products and probably perishable products more than anything else, it's a very complicated market. Why is it complicated? It's complicated because there are many different sort of levels or links in the supply chain. You know, you would have, if you're a Bulgarian company, you would be the manufacturer, but then somebody has to import the product into the country. And it's not just about, you know, putting it on a truck or on a ship and clearing customs in the port in New Jersey or the Carolinas or anywhere else. There's a lot more to it than that. You know, somebody needs to manage your business in the US, and that means maintaining distribution networks, broker networks, and all sorts of other things. Which, you know, it could be done by you, it could be done by an importer. There are many different kind of routes to market, but it's something that needs to be very, very carefully considered. And this is where a lot of the information we just heard about following light laws and regulations, whether it's packaging, whether it's food claims, whether it's state laws, all that stuff. You have to be very, very aware of the legal environment in the US. Obviously, sort of tax and accounting practices of all sorts are very important as well. But then beyond that, you know, whether it's your own entity in the US, and there are a couple of great examples of Bulgarian companies that have set up their own shop in the US in the food and beverage arena. Fikusota is probably one example. They have kind of built their own office in the US. They decided to kind of go down that way. You know, I wouldn't say that I would recommend it in every case because it really depends on your strategies, depends on your goals, depends on the resources that you can set aside to do that, because it's not an easy thing. Obviously, working with an importer is probably easier and more of a one-stop shop. And then there's also all these distributor networks. I mean, at Tremona, we work with the two big ones, which are KEHI and UNFI. But also there's a plethora of local and regional distributors, which can actually create quite a bit of business for you. One maybe common misconception is about the US that it's kind of like a single country, a single market. And as you know, we preach, and Ivo Konstantinov knows this probably better than I do, is that you know, it's a very big market with very different tastes, preferences, supply chain situations around the country. And what sells in New York may not necessarily sell in Dallas, Texas, or Chicago, Illinois, or anywhere else in the country. So you really have to look at it as more of a collection of markets, if you will, and depending on what the product is and where the best market for this would be. And to give you a quick example from the food industry, traditionally, sort of specialty foods, if you will, have sold better kind of in the northeast of the US. And this would be, you know, jams, cookies, crackers, all these kind of things, cheeses even to a degree, that are more traditional. New age healthy products have done really well in California and the West Coast, you know, Oregon and Washington State. So, you know, depending on what your product is, you might kind of look at it that way. And of course, there's also the expat market. You know, for us Bulgarians, the biggest expat market is in Chicago, but also through Chicago, you know, there are a bunch of networks that we also engage with that have, you know, kind of stores all over the country. So, you know, Chicago could be the hub, but from there, you know, you can reach many different customers and consumers around the country. And then finally, you get to the retailer and food service operator. And the biggest difference from most, I think, EU markets, as well as, you know, the Middle East and Asia for that matter, is that you really have these layers, and these layers mean complexity and they mean cost. So, you know, as an exporter, as a manufacturer, you really have to be aware of how these things work and make sure that once you get to the consumer, you know, that price that you have your product is competitive. It's comparable to whoever else is out there, and you're not, you know, completely out of line. Sometimes companies think that because their, you know, FOB cost is pretty good, you know, by the time they get to the retail shelf is going to be fine. And sometimes it's not exactly, because you have all these kind of layers. Yes, e-commerce has been growing very quickly, but anyone who's worked with Amazon knows that, you know, Amazon would really charge an arm and a leg. And, you know, it's not cheap and it's not that easy. And again, I don't mean to scare anybody. I'm just kind of saying that you really need to be aware of what's going on in the market before you really jump in and really do your homework. And I think whether it's the US-Bulgarian Chamber in America, whether it's the Bulgarian Embassy and all the consulates and all the people involved, you know, get as much information as you possibly can in order to make those decisions. Because it's really not sort of a, you know, one size fits all approach. You really have to think about it hard. And also, you know, set aside resources and not just money. I mean, just time, people that are willing to kind of jump in and do these things. So if we can get to the next slide, please. So this is somewhat of a repeat, I guess, which is probably a good thing from some of what you've heard before, but it's also validation. And I'm just going to run quickly through these things. Obviously, having a high quality product is a prerequisite. I mean, the US market is where the best of the best in the world come in and compete. So bringing just another Me Too product, even if it's cheap, is generally not going to do the trick. You really need to stand out, both from a quality perspective and also from a differentiation perspective. Your product has to somehow bring something new to the market. And that really applies to pretty much any industry and any field for that matter. You really have to come up with something that's interesting, unique, different, and price competitive, of course. Obviously, legal compliance, which we heard a lot about. In our world, insurance is important. You know, sufficient liability insurance and all these things, those are prerequisites. Supporting materials, I think we heard about, you know, how to do well with your business communication and how to write emails and make an impact and communicate well. These things are obviously very important. Simple things like, you know, letter format versus A4 and things of that nature. Sometimes people forget it's somewhat different. In our world, obviously, just bringing an interesting product to the marketplace is not going to cut it. You know, marketing support, whether it's on the sales side or on the consumer side, is important. We have things like slotting allowances and free fills and whatnot, which are generally not the norm around the world. You have to be aware that this is part of doing business, and you need to understand how these things work. because you don't want to be in a situation where you don't have a budget to take care of these things, and you're faced with them, and you might be missing on a great opportunity. And again, I can't probably emphasize this enough, but being competitive, having a price on shelf that works, making sure that you price all those kind of layers of the supply chain in your price before you go to market, it's also very important. So next slide, please. So a couple of quick thoughts on what's been happening with the pandemic, because obviously the world from a year ago is not the world today. And anyone who thinks that, once we get into 2021, things are going to go back to normal is probably somewhat mistaken. I think for two reasons. The first reason is that it's going to take a while, and we can probably all agree on that. But the other reason is that the world has changed, and whether it's for the better or for the worse, we'll know at some point. But the world has changed. I think the sort of the huge, busy expos and things of that nature, it's going to be a while before they come back. And also, I think a lot of these online platforms, whether it's kind of Zoom or ArrangeMe or anything else, are here to stay. They make things a lot more efficient. It's a bit like, how the 3-martini lunch kind of went away. I think a lot of these kind of get-togethers at big conventions are also probably not going to be with us the same way because they're more efficient ways to do business, simply. And I think there are a lot of these tools that have been with us for a while, but I think the pandemic accelerated that stuff to a great degree. Now, in our world, in the world of food and beverage, what we've been seeing is that consumers are looking for value. They've always been looking for value, but in times of crisis, they look for value even more. I was heading the private label practice at IRI, which is kind of a big data and consuming and consulting firm based in Chicago when the financial crisis hit. And all of a sudden, it was kind of an obscure practice that nobody was that interested in. All of a sudden, there was like tons of interest because all of the big retailers were ramping up their efforts around private label, because private label always jumps when consumers are uncertain or they want to save money. Private label in the US is smaller than it is in Europe and most other countries. So there's probably a lot of room for growth. And what we've seen in the last 6 months or so is huge jump in private label. And the other was all sorts of value packs, whether it's multi-packs, bigger sizes, family sizes, all these things. So that's one thing we've seen. The other is, and that probably goes across the board, is e-commerce. If you can do e-commerce, go for it in any way, shape, or form. You obviously have the supply chain to sustain that, but we just see it across the board everywhere. For us, it's a little more complicated because we're a perishable product, so the infrastructure required is much greater. So we don't have our own sort of delivery service, but we work with the Whole Foods delivery service as well as a few others. And it's difficult to estimate right now, but I would say probably our delivery business has jumped considerably over the last 6 months, and we don't, we don't think it's going to go anywhere. It's going to be there. The other challenge, and that probably goes for other categories as well, is this whole limited assortment thing. What that means is that during the height of the pandemic, and probably to this point and to this day, many retailers focused on keeping the shelves full, making sure that all their staple, high rotation items were there and available. And basically what happens is that they would focus on sort of your Oreo cookies and all these things, and they would probably pay less attention to all these specialty, natural, imported foods and items, which is unfortunate because this is where a lot of the innovation comes from, and this is where the field that we play in. And this is where most imported food products would come, not just from Bulgaria, but from anywhere in the world. And so we've seen a lot of supply chain disruptions, a lot of issues, and a lot of retailers who don't have sophisticated systems in place would just completely ignore them and just make sure that the big brands are there. It has gone somewhat better, we think, in the last maybe month or two, and it's probably going to get better as well. But combined with kind of a consumer interest towards these comfort foods or whatever you want to call them, has been kind of a challenge, I think, for all of us. So smaller companies, and I would assume that this probably is valid not just for food, but for other products as well. Coming in with a new product now is actually harder than it was a year or two ago, just because you need a well-oiled supply chain, and it's in a bit of a flux. I believe this is something that it's going to get a lot better in 2020, I think, and it's going to accelerate a lot of these innovation platforms and delivery services and whatnot. But for the time being, it's a bit of an issue. Next slide, please. So again, not going to go into too much detail, but my advice to anyone who is either thinking of exporting, who's exporting right now, or is kind of playing around with the idea is do your homework. That's probably the most important thing. And we've heard quite a bit already about whether it's going to call people, whether it's somebody who has had experience in the field, whether it's obviously the Bulgarian embassy and the consulate provide great information. The US-Bulgarian chamber can provide great information. Use your network as much as you can. Google is also a good friend of yours. There's a lot of research out there that's going to help you. In the field of food and beverage, choosing your route to market is important, just because I said what I said earlier, which is it's a complicated supply chain and a costly one. So you have to make sure that depending on your resources, depending on your goal and objectives, you find the right route to market. You have to map it out and make sure you understand the cost implications before you do anything. Obviously, make sure you're ready. Just go through your checklist, and also make sure that there's enough organizational focus on this. I mean, the US is kind of a long-term strategy for anybody. This is not something you can come in and make your mark in about 6 months to a year. This is more of like a 1 to 3 year project. So you have to make sure that your organization, your bosses, anybody there kind of buys into this, because if you're thinking of making sort of a quick buck, to use that analogy, it's probably not going to happen. This is, it's more of a marathon and not a sprint. So you have to be ready to kind of go in and commit it to it. Is it getting any easier? No, this has been a very, very hard year for just about anybody. Is it worth it? Absolutely. No doubt about it. For any company that's in Bulgaria and is thinking of, and whether it's coming in and setting up your own office, whether it's selling outsourcing services, which Bulgarian companies are awesome at, whether it's exporting actual finished product, there's always a great opportunity. And as they say, never waste a good crisis. I mean, the thing about the crisis is that it kind of rearranges the chips a little bit, which means that there will be cracks, there will be opportunities, and all you have to do is kind of jump in, because in fact, sometimes you could argue that trying to do something in a crisis might be even better and easier. I think 2021 is going to be much better for all of us. No doubt about that. I mean, I should knock on wood multiple times, but there have been kind of a lot of backed up, demand, business, a lot of unfinished work for us, at least, and for other companies as well, from 2020 that's going to spill over into 2021. And I feel that it's going to be just about better for everybody. So I know I kind of galloped through this rather quickly, but thanks very much. Thanks to Elise. Thanks to the US-Bulgarian Chamber and everyone else.
Thank you so much, Pavel. We'd love to host you again and elaborate more on what you just said, because like I said, you're definitely, an example that a lot of companies probably would like to look up to and follow as well. So with that, I would like to thank all of you for being with us today and for staying on. I know we went over time, but thank you so much for making the time. You will receive tomorrow a follow-up email with a survey. Please take a few moments to complete the survey. If the attendees have any questions, please submit them to the Q&A box. I see someone has raised a hand. I will allow that person to ask their question. Evgeny, would you like to ask a question? Okay, I'm not sure if they can hear us, but please submit your questions like I already said. And just to attest to what Pavel was saying, it is in every household. I'm not paid to do a commercial, but it is in every household. It is the true Bulgarian yogurt. So we all love it, and we look forward to even more new products. And again, please like us, follow us, be with us again. We will be in front of you with more events. We are doing the calendar for next year right now. And everyone, please be healthy, be safe, and happy holidays. Let's hope for a really, really better next new year. Thank you so much.